On the first night of October 2004, the wind descended from the mountains of Montana like an ancient creature, whispering among the pines, dragging the metallic scent of approaching snow. The world slept, swallowed by a silence so thick it felt tangible. But not Claire Donovan. She was awake, as always. Since the accident, time had become a windowless prison. The clock on the wall had stopped at 10:17 p.m. on the night her son's laughter ceased, and nothing had moved since then. The curtains remained closed, the radio silenced, and the sound of non-existent footsteps still echoed through the wooden corridors, like memories refusing to die. Claire lived there, suspended between the world of the living and the echo of an absence. That night, the cold seemed more attentive than ever. The wind beat against the walls of the house with an irregular cadence, almost human, and the creaking of the floorboards responded like a weary heart. Then it happened. Something broke the pattern of silence. A sound, so unexpected, so alive, that it made her body freeze. A laugh, high, light, free. Claire stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the window. That sound couldn't exist. Not in that place, not at that hour. It was as if the very air had remembered what it was like to be happy. She walked slowly to the door, her heart racing as if trying to keep up with her. When she opened it, the wind rushed into the house with the force of a forgotten past. The laughter repeated, coming from afar, from the snow-covered hills. It was a child's laugh, but not human. There was a crystalline timbre to it, a vibration that made the air tremble, as if every snowflake had its own note. Claire felt tears well up before she even understood why. And then she saw. A blue light, pulsing, descended slowly over the valley. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a meteor. It was something more, organic, breathing among the clouds. The blue reflection spread over the frozen lake, transforming it into a living mirror. For an instant, she felt the entire world holding its breath. The sound, that impossible laughter, echoed once more, mingling with the beat of invisible wings in the air. The wind ceased. Everything hung suspended, and Claire Donovan, the woman who didn't sleep, realized that something, somewhere between the stars and the earth, had just responded. In the days that followed, Claire tried to convince herself that none of it had happened. The sound, the light, the laughter, it could all be just a trick of her weary mind, an illusion shaped by solitude and cold. But inside her, something was beginning to move again, like the thaw of a river trapped by years of winter. For the first time in months, she opened the curtains. The dawn light flooded the room, touching the dust-covered furniture, revealing the traces of a life that had stopped in time. The air seemed different, lighter, more attentive. When she went out to sweep the porch, the wind blew her hair, and for an instant, she thought she heard that sound again. Distant, brief, almost imperceptible, but enough to make her look at the sky. The nearest town was nearly an hour away, a cluster of smoking rooftops and curious smiles. Claire entered the little corner cafe, and when she mentioned a blue light over the lake, silence fell. Then came the laughs. Gentle, condescending. A man in a hat chuckled. The mountain widow saw electric angels. She smiled back, pretending it didn't hurt. But inside, she felt alive for the first time in a long time, because even if no one believed her, she knew something had happened. In the following days, Claire began to walk farther. The ice crackled under her boots. The sound of the trees echoed like ancient voices. She heard everything. The rustle of leaves, the snap of stones, the murmur of the wind in the valley. It was as if the earth was speaking to her again, waiting for her to respond. And there was an expectation in the air, a feeling that something, at some invisible point, was preparing to return. It was on a grey morning that the impossible called to her again. The fog covered the lake like a veil when Claire saw something fallen near the shore. A small, huddled, translucent body. Her first instinct was fear, the second, compassion. She approached slowly, her heart beating against her chest like an ancient drum. The being breathed with difficulty, emitting a low sound between laughter and sigh. Its eyes were large, liquid, almost white blue, and reflected something she recognized: pain and innocence. Claire knelt, hesitant. The being didn't react with hostility, it just lifted its face, as if it had been waiting for her for a long time. And then, that sound, The laughter, light, familiar, impossible. She took off her coat, wrapped the small body, and carried it home, the wind cutting her face like blades of ice. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel cold. Before we continue, if this story is touching something inside you, if you've ever felt like the universe tried to tell you something in a way no one would believe, leave your like, subscribe, and write in the comments, "I believe." Because maybe the answers you're seeking are closer than they seem. The being slept for hours on the sofa, wrapped in Claire's wool coat. Its skin seemed crystalline under the firelight, as if the flame itself hesitated between burning it and worshipping it. When it breathed, the air moved strangely. The curtains swayed lightly, the glasses trembled on the shelves, and even the sound of the wind seemed to change frequency. It was as if the entire house was listening to it. When it woke, it opened its eyes slowly. They reflected everything, the fire, the shadow, her face. And then it made a sound, not a word, but something that vibrated between laughter and the echo of the world. Claire responded with a soft murmur, almost like speaking to a child. "It's okay. You're safe." And the being, as if understanding, repeated the sound. Identical. Perfect. A sonic mirror. That's how she called it. Echo. In the following days, it began to react to the environment like a curious animal and like something far beyond that. It watched the fire with almost hypnotic attention, touched the wooden table with long fingers, exploring textures as if every object had a soul. It didn't speak, but its presence spoke. When Claire moved, it followed. When she cried, the air vibrated in response. It was as if the universe, through it, was trying to console what life hadn't known how to heal. One afternoon, she noticed something extraordinary. While washing dishes, she began to hum a song she used to sing to her son, a low sound, broken by emotion. Suddenly the windows trembled and the melody continued. Even after she stopped, Echo was repeating it, not in human sound but in vibration, as if the air molecules had learned the refrain. Claire brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes welling up. The impossible was alive before her. From then on, she began to talk, not with the hope of being understood, but because, somehow, Echo heard what no one else could. She told old stories, from a time when a child's laughter filled that house. She spoke of the accident, the silence, the guilt, and as she spoke, Echo drew closer and touched her hand. Its touch was warm, vibrant, and, for an instant, the pain disappeared. When the sun set, Claire sat by the fireplace and watched Echo play with the flames, reflecting blue and golden lights in its eyes. It moved its hands in the air and left luminous trails, like ephemeral drawings that faded with time. Each gesture seemed to contain a lost language, made of empathy, not words. That night, she dreamed of her son for the first time in years, and in the dream, the boy laughed, the same sound she had heard on that first October night. When she woke, Echo was standing by the window, looking at the sky, and something in its body emanated the same frequency as that distant laughter. Claire understood. The being didn't just imitate. It felt. And, for the first time since the day her world collapsed, Claire smiled without guilt. That night, the fireplace crackled softly, and the sound of the wind outside sounded like an old language the mountain used to converse with the sky. Claire fell asleep in the armchair, her body exhausted, her heart restless. She dreamed of her son, not as she remembered him, but as if time had purified him. He stood in the field, under a deep and breathing sky, with the same blue light that had once descended over the valley. He smiled, and when he opened his mouth, the words crossed the air like a blessing. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." The tone was so sweet, so sure that Claire awoke in tears, her fingers still trying to grasp the dream before it dissolved. The house was silent, but not empty. Echo remained there, motionless, watching her from the shadow. There was a new luminosity in its eyes, not just reflected light, but something own, intimate, conscious. Claire felt that it knew what she had seen, that, in some unfathomable way, it had dreamed the same dream too, and that scared her. Because if it could share her visions, then perhaps it also carried the weight of the pain she tried to hide. In the days that followed, Claire began to avoid it. She tried to occupy herself with mundane things, sorting drawers, lighting candles, sweeping the floor. But Echo felt her distance. Its light, once vibrant, became weak, faded, almost grey. It would stop in front of the window, looking at the frozen lake with the same melancholy of someone observing a door that never opens. It was as if its very existence depended on her closeness. And now, separated, the energy between them dissipated slowly, like the heat of a dying star. One afternoon, at sunset, Claire found it fallen near the fireplace. The small body trembled, and the glow of its skin cracked in opaque fissures. A low sound filled the air, not of pain, but of lament, an underground echo that made the floor vibrate. Claire knelt, instinct overcoming fear. She held it, and the sensation was like touching a heart made of light. In that instant, the environment reacted. The candles flickered, the walls seemed to pulse, and the air became thick, almost liquid. What was happening couldn't be explained. It was as if the entire universe was inhaling along with them. She understood, in a flash that transcended reasoning, that being wasn't there to be saved. It was the one saving her. It didn't heal a body, but an emptiness. Every vibration, every sound it emitted seemed to tear a fragment from the pain accumulated in years of silence. The embrace she gave it was the first true act of love since the day she had lost everything. And, in that moment, the world seemed to spin to an invisible point of balance. The air shimmered with colours that didn't exist, tones reminiscent of auroras and seas from another time. Claire cried, but her tears weren't of sadness. They were of liberation. Echo, wrapped in her arms, emitted a high, prolonged sound, like laughter crossed by eternity. The house trembled, the windows vibrated, and for an instant she saw, not with her eyes, but with her soul, her son smiling behind it, the same expression, the same glow. The fear dissolved. When the phenomenon ceased, Claire remained there, motionless, feeling only the warmth of the small body and the echo of something sacred lingering in the air. She knew, without needing words, that something in her had changed forever. Grief no longer held the same power. The pain still existed, but it had been pierced by light. And in that crossing, the silence within her, that impenetrable and dark silence, broke. Outside, the first stars began to appear, and, for the first time since the accident, Claire felt the desire to breathe deeply, to look at the sky, to believe that there might be a purpose in continuing to live. The following days unfolded like the slow thaw of a forgotten landscape. Winter began to dissolve, the wind became less cruel, and the lake, that motionless mirror guarding echoes of the past, began to free its surface from the ice. Claire walked around it every morning, accompanied by Echo, who now seemed stronger, more present, almost luminous in its serenity. There was something different in its gaze, a silent longing, as if it recognized the distant sound of a home that wasn't there. During the day, it touched objects like someone saying goodbye. The piano Claire had never opened again, the dust-covered books, the yellowed photographs that time tried to erase. At night, it sat by the window and looked at the sky, a lingering, patient gaze, full of yearning. Sometimes the air vibrated around it, and a bluish light projected onto the walls, pulsing like a distant heart. Claire watched in silence, unable to decide if what she felt was fear or love. One night, the wind blew with a different intensity, bringing a metallic and cold perfume, the same as the first time. The mountains gleamed with a silver tone, and the sky covered itself in points that blinked in regular patterns, as if someone up there was trying to communicate. Claire realized it was a call. Echo's body reacted immediately. Its skin shimmered, its eyes lit up, and a low, rhythmic sound began to emanate from it. It was a living frequency, and the ground vibrated under her feet. She understood. It needed to leave, but understanding didn't mean accepting. Inside her, the old wound opened again, not as pain, but as resistance. She had just allowed herself to feel again, and now the universe asked her to let go. The idea of returning to silence terrified her. She sat beside it, and for the first time spoke with anger, almost in whispers. "You can't leave me. Not now. Not after all this." Echo turned to her, and even without a mouth, even without words, Claire understood the response. The love that heals never binds. It frees. On the night of departure, the sky tore open in lights. Lightning without thunder crossed the clouds, and the air smelled of iron and memory. Echo left the house, drawn by the distant glow, and Claire followed, her hair wet from the rain, her feet sinking into the cold mud. The wind was so strong it stole her breath, but she continued, shouting the name she had given it. Echo! Please wait! It was in the middle of the field, kneeling under the weight of something invisible. The light in its body weakened, like a star about to go out. Claire ran to it and held it in her arms, trembling with fear, tears mixed with the storm. You're not broken, she said, her voice breaking. You just forgot how to shine. Those words seemed to open a portal within it. The skin emitted light again. The vibrations took over the field, and the wind stopped. Not diminished, it simply ceased. An absolute silence covered the mountain. Echo floated slowly above the ground, enveloped by a blue aura, and Claire, with her heart shattered and full at the same time, let it go. It looked at her, or perhaps inside her, and then ascended. The sky opened, and dozens of lights responded, blinking in sync. For a brief instant, Claire had the sensation that those lights were also watching her, recognizing her as part of the same vastness. She fell to her knees, her arms still outstretched, as the being disappeared into the immensity, leaving behind only the echo of a laughter, the same sound that had once made her open the door. And when it all ended, only the wind remained, light and warm, caressing her face like a goodbye. The silence that settled after that night was no longer the same heavy and cruel silence Claire knew, the one that had once turned her house into a tomb. This was a different kind of silence, a living space, breathing, full of invisible echoes. When the sun rose, the snow reflected tones of gold and silver, and there was a serenity in the air that didn't belong just to the weather. It was the calm that remains after a miracle. Claire woke feeling something different in her body, as if the boundaries between what was inside and what was outside had dissolved. The house, once cold and still, now seemed to pulse in sync with her heartbeat. The sound of the walls creaking was soft, rhythmic, almost a whisper of gratitude. She opened the windows, and the wind entered without violence, just bringing the scent of the lake and the murmur of the trees. For the first time in years, the air didn't hurt. As she walked through the rooms, she noticed that small changes had happened without her realizing. The old wood of the doors gleamed with more color. The mirrors reflected lights that didn't exist. And on the table lay the coat with which she had covered Echo. Dry, light, as if it had never been wet by the rain. Touching it was like touching a dream. Claire smiled, not because everything was fine, but because for the first time, fine no longer depended on the absence of pain. There was beauty in what had left. That afternoon, she drove to town. The people, surprised, looked at her like someone seeing a ghost come back to life. Her disheveled hair had given way to a serene countenance, and her gaze, once dull, now held the glow of someone who had returned from far away. In the little cafe, the same faces that had once laughed at the mountain widow now greeted her with silent respect. "You look different, Claire," said a woman behind the counter. "More alive." She just smiled without explaining. That night, she went to the church. The piano that no one else played was covered in dust, and the candles burned in lazy flames. Claire sat down, placed her hands on the keys, and waited. The sound that emerged was hesitant, shy, like notes waking from a long sleep. But as she played, the music freed itself. It was simple, pure, almost childlike, and it filled the temple with a light that seemed to come from within her. Some people passing by on the street stopped to listen. Later, one of them commented having seen on that same night a blue light crossing the sky and disappearing over the mountains. No one knew how to explain, but everyone felt the same thing, peace. Later, back at the house, Claire lit a candle and sat in the yard. The sky was clear, deep, full of stars. Among them, one blinked, 3 times in long, paused intervals. She recognized the pattern. It was the same rhythm Echo made when it wanted to say it was listening. Claire smiled with teary eyes and murmured, almost voiceless, "Thank you for reminding me what it means to be alive," the wind responded, gently moving the porch leaves, and for an instant, she was certain that the universe, in some way, was also listening to her. 5 years passed since the night the stars answered back. Time, with its subtle way of healing, dissolved the pain into memory, and the memory into gratitude. Claire aged without haste. Her hair turned silver, her face gained soft lines, and her gaze, once marked by loss, now held the kind of calm that only those who have crossed the storm understand. She continued living in the same house now covered in vines and wildflowers, and every morning, when opening the windows, she felt the same mountain wind blow over her face, bringing that cold scent of metal and eternity. In 2009, she decided to write, not for fame, nor to prove what had happened, but to record what the silence had taught. She called the manuscript, "The Night the Stars Answered Back." She sat in front of the old typewriter, the sound of the keys echoing like the beat of distant wings, and began, "I don't write to convince anyone that it was real. I write because there are things that only become true when they are remembered." The pages filled slowly and tenderly. She didn't describe Echo as a creature from another world, nor as a miracle. She spoke of it like one speaks of a friend who came at the right time, a traveler lost among the stars who found shelter in the heart of a broken woman. Between the lines, there was more than an account. There was the recognition that the universe speaks, and sometimes it speaks in a human voice. In the last chapter, she wrote, "Echo didn't come to teach me about life beyond Earth. He came to remind me about life on it." Those words remained on the page like an eternal whisper. When she finished, Claire turned off the light and stayed silent. The wind outside moved the curtains delicately, and then something changed in the air. A sound, soft, distant, familiar. A laughter, light as falling snow. Alive as the first sound that had made her open the door so many years before. The same laugh that had broken the silence and brought back the meaning of existing. She closed her eyes, smiled, and let the sound envelop her. For a moment, the house seemed to breathe along with her. The fireplace flames danced in shades of blue, and the clock, the one that had stopped at 10:17 p.m., made a single brief movement. Tick outside, the sky sparkled with a constellation no one had ever named, and anyone looking closely would see a point of light blink 3 times. Paused, the sound of the laughter mixed with the wind, then with nothing. But nothing, Claire now knew, was just the universe listening. If this story touched your heart, leave in the comments. I believe. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that love and hope aren't of this world. They come through it, and never forget. Sometimes, the universe doesn't send answers, just company.